Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening for the kickoff of Opportunity Justice's Spatial Justice Project. My name is Rabbi Joui Hessel and I'm the Vice President of Jewish Life at the 92nd Street Y. We invite all of you to any and all of our programs. Just look at 92y.org. Spatial justice is a relatively new term that explores how the physical design and use of public and communal spaces shape our society. A central goal of the Spatial Justice Project is to explore how these common spaces often express and drive exclusion, prejudices, and otherness. Tonight, we're going to delve into that conversation. We'll hear stories from two formerly incarcerated people developed through the Moth storytelling workshop. We'll hear a conversation moderated by Opportunity Justice's founder, Safian, with a progressive district attorney, two criminal justice thought leaders, and a Cherokee tribal leader, where you'll be invited to ask your questions via the chat function on the live stream. We'll also hear Majora share about her forthcoming book, Reclaiming Your Community, and hear a brief but powerful spoken word performance from formerly incarcerated musician Kenyatta Emmanuel. We will then close the evening with a multi-faith ecumenical benediction. As your host for the event, I want to give you a quick outline of how this evening came to be. In August, Tommy proposed the Spatial Justice Project, and through Opportunity Justice, quickly built a coalition of support to stage a series of public exhibits next fall during the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Why does this project pair with the Jewish holiday of Sukkot and spatial justice? Well, Sukkot is marked by the Jewish people by building temporary structures. Most New Yorkers see them every year outside of synagogues and Jewish cultural centers. Ours is on the roof. Sukkot means small hut or shelter. And these temporary structures commemorate the temporary shelters the Jews built after being freed from slavery in Egypt, while they wandered in the wilderness in search of their new home. Sukkot are physical symbols and reminders of freedom from oppression. They're three-sided, with a wide entrance to welcome people inside, and are festooned with greenery and produce to symbolize the bounty and sustenance nature and God provide. The Spatial Justice Project public exhibits will set a traditional sukkah next to what we're calling a confinement sukkah, a physical representation of a solitary confinement cell. This sukkah will be small, bare, bleak, and in place of greenery, draped in barbed wire. The juxtaposition of these two sukkot highlight the dichotomy between freedom and community on one hand, and on the other, the intentional isolation, deprivation, and cruelty of incarceration. While the Spatial Justice Project relies on the symbols of Jewish tradition and on the solitary confinement cell, it is designed to engage all religions, all communities, all stakeholders in criminal justice, and our common civic society, and provide opportunity to conceive of new ways and new spaces to approach the social justice challenges we face today. The public exhibits will feature on-site facilitators in partnership with Opportunity Justice to share stories and explore positive outcomes for all. As you may sense, I am personally very excited about this collaborative project. You can learn more about it at opportunityjustice.com. And now that that is set, it's time to begin our program. I'd like to begin by inviting everyone at home to join me in commemorating the third night of Hanukkah as I light the menorahs and recite the two short prayers. For those of you who know the prayer, please join me. And for those who do not, I invite you to think of your own histories of freedom as we light the candles and give thanks. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahalik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavoteinu bayamim hahem b'zman hazeh. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our first esteemed guest. Please welcome Devon Sanford, sorry, Devon, Program Manager of Community Projects at the storytelling organization, the Moth. Devon.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Yes, as Rabbi mentioned, my name is Devon Sandiford. I'm the Program Manager of Community Engagement at the Moth. For those of you who don't know, the Moth is an organization that will be in its 25th year next year. It is a storytelling organization that is dedicated to promoting the art and craft of storytelling. Most people know it just for that portion of the mission. There's a podcast that is downloaded 90 million times a year. There's a radio hour that's in almost 600 stations nationwide. And most people know it for that reason. The connection to tonight is a little bit broader than that and goes into the second half of the Moth's mission statement. And the second half is to honor and celebrate the diversity and commonality of human experiences. So as we think about this second half of our mission statement, it goes beyond just the idea of storytelling and goes into the realm of the importance of having everyone's experience shared. And when we talk about this, like one of the things that we usually like to talk about is the ways in which the dominant narrative usually takes over the narrative. And something that we do in the community program that I work with is making sure that we go into communities, nonprofits, cultural centers, and interact within communities to talk about storytelling, to bring forth stories that are often not given as much light. And that is really important to us at the Moth, because we believe that in order for us to have like our full understanding of our human experience, that we need to have a full representation of what our humanity is. And we got to go into communities where people are not necessarily being quiet. They may be speaking loudly, but they may not have the platform to be put into the mainstream. And so this collaboration that we did with Spatial Justice Project was an introductory workshop. We have two main types of workshops that we do through the community program. One's an introductory one. It's a 3-hour session, and we have an intensive one, which is 15 hours, which allows us to dig a little deeper. The one that we did with Spatial Justice Project was an intro. And with that, I'm going to actually just introduce you to our first storyteller. She was a part of the Moth's introductory workshop. Her name is Karen Thomas, and she is a formerly incarcerated person. And I'm going to pass it to her now so she can share her experience.
Thank you, Devon. About 40 plus years ago, I was married, owned my own home. I taught high school English. I owned a deli and a catering business. When I became pregnant in 1978, I thought, wow, this is going to be my ideal life. But it was anything but ideal. My husband became abusive, increasingly abusive, threatening me, stalking me at my job, hitting me. And I was scared. I was ashamed and scared. I didn't want to admit that I had chosen this man. And I didn't want to admit to my family that my life was not ideal. It was a horror. I was scared also that if I confided in anybody, he'd find out and hit me more for telling. But eventually the bruises couldn't be hidden any longer. When my child was 2 years old, we divorced. But even that didn't help. The abuse kept getting worse and worse. He kicked me down a flight of stairs, threw boiling water on me, broke my jaw while I was holding the baby, broke my nose at work. I had him arrested. I got an order of protection. And he violated that order of protection over and over. And sometimes when I called the cops, they were students that I had taught in school. The embarrassment grew. I stopped calling the cops. I started to hide. I took the baby. I went out of town. I went everywhere that I could find a place that was safe, and I couldn't find one. He took me to court. I took him to court. The judge ordered him to have visitation. I felt like the system failed me and that nobody could help me with this. Ray took the baby on a visit in 1981 and brought him back bruised and crying. The baby said Ray hit him. I went back to court with the evidence that I had, but the same judge allowed unsupervised visitation to continue. The week before his next scheduled unsupervised visitation, he came to the house. He told me he was going to take the baby to the Middle East and I'd never see him again. Then he started to hit me for the last time because I snapped and I killed him. In 1983, I was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. The day I arrived in Bedford Hills, I was placed in an isolation cell, a segregation cell with nothing in it. My despair had become complete. The system failed me again. But I pulled myself together and decided that I had to make every minute count, because if I didn't do everything I could to make the system work and make it a better place, then I was part of the problem. So I started reading directives and policy and procedure, and I started to help the women and got a job in grievance, helping them file complaints. And the superintendent took notice and she asked me to work for her. So I started working directly for her, translating everything into Spanish, typing, filing, doing all the directives the way I felt would be the best way for the women to have as much as they could without violating any laws. In 1985, the Commission Against Domestic Violence came to visit us in prison. The ladies brought stories of how they had just had a hearing. Some people who were at the hearing were women who had gotten out safely. And the Commission of Domestic Violence Against Domestic Violence said, what a wonderful way to let people know that women have gotten home, gotten out, been able to leave an abusive situation. Isn't that wonderful? Of course, I was invited just to listen. But I opened my mouth and said, well, what about us? We didn't get out safely. We killed somebody or we left in a bad way because we were desperate. We tried to protect our family. We tried everything we knew how properly. Why can't we have a hearing? Why can't we have a hearing right here in prison and tell the world how the system failed us and how we couldn't get out safely? Well, everybody looked at me with their mouths open because they didn't expect me to say anything. But a few minutes later, the superintendent said, you know what? I think it's doable. So in 1986, we testified with commissioners and legislators and everybody there. And we told how our stories were that we couldn't get out. We tried, but we couldn't. There were 12 of us. And from that grew to a family violence program that the commissioner actually gave us a budget line to fund. And it became such a successful program that it was a national model. And it became in every prison across the country. So I think that this is the best way to speak. It wasn't then, but it is now. I know that these women got so much support and they came home better equipped to face society, better equipped to hold their heads up. And I know that because I'm one of them. I was released in 2017 after 35 years of my sentence. I share my story everywhere I can because I know that if I tell the women, a first step to getting help is to speak out. I needed help and I didn't get it. But I help them now and I tell them, don't do what I did. Don't be me. Get out safely, leave, hold your head up, talk to people, share. You're not alone in the world. I know I can't change that I committed the crime, but I'll never let it define me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Erin. Such a moving story, and I love the way in which no one expected you to speak, and what happened when you did speak, and the power that came with that. It's so meaningful to me. Most of my life, I didn't speak up about anything myself, and so I think when anyone who has been quiet for a long time or who is not expected to speaks up, there's a lot of people who will follow. And I hope there's some people who have heard your story who will take on that call as well. One of the things that we like to talk, one of my favorite authors likes to talk about, Jason Reynolds, he likes to talk about like complicating the narrative. And I think something that's really nice about sharing your story is that people like to put people into boxes. A criminal is this, and this is the only thing they can do, and this is who they are. And once you share your story, we get to see like more elements of who you are. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. And with that, I'm gonna pass it right over to our next storyteller, another formerly incarcerated person, Walter Escobar. Take it away, Walter.
Thank you. My name is Walter Escobar. I come from Jersey City. And I guess my story begins, as a journey that I begin that, embarked at a very young age. And though my story may be a bit dramatic, and I feel like, that's the way life takes its course. It's we're here, it's here to bring you life lessons that you can carry on for the rest of your life. Through the hardships, I always felt grounded and supported by my close family and friends. This gave me a level head, and as I was growing up, I felt like I could defeat the system. I had a close, tight-knit family who looked out for me. We looked out for each other, and through my career as this selfish delinquent, they never gave up on me, and we always kept a close bond. So my first encounters with the law started at 16 years old, when I was approached by a couple of detectives, and they were approaching me in regards to an incident that didn't involve me, but I kind of fit the description. But they ended up doing a random search and caught me with marijuana in my coat pocket. And though I didn't fit the description of that crime that they was looking for some sort of suspects, I felt like I was guilty of my own crime. And from there, I felt like that was the beginning of a repetitive misbehavior that would change the course of my life for a long time, and the dark direction that I was headed into. So from there, every time I got rearrested, this charge would always come up. It was like that nagging ex-girlfriend that you always wanted to escape but kept haunting you. Even though you guys were broken up. But sometimes you beat yourself up because that's the situation you put yourself in the first place. So this was like sometimes you feel like you're trapped in the system. You're property of the state, and you wish you can escape all these situations that put you into like a deep drought, as far as facing these sanctions and repercussions. This brought a lot of anguish, and at that time I felt like after years of the misbehaviors and all that, I felt vulnerable. And my last charge was a felony, and I feel like I could have avoided that, because without the proper defense in court, that kind of marked me for life. So from the many, from being barred from those job opportunities, certain law restrictions against people who are formerly incarcerated, I was living in denial, just for putting myself in the first place, myself in that situation in the first place. I felt powerless. By all this, I decided to just give in. I had to make necessary changes to get my life back in order. So even though I was dealing with these stipulations, I wanted to prove myself that this situation was not going to defeat me. Like, even though I felt trapped from being constantly like supervised, I knew, with faith and accountability, I'd be able to get through this. It's a concept that I want to kind of bring to life, because that's why I advocate for guys who are coming home. Having to deal with the trauma of incarceration can be burdening, and I want to help those who are less fortunate of a support system. I had that family who kept that close, tight knit, and they always supported me, even though I was making these mistakes. So I want to begin, with kind of mentoring, the troubled youth, because I feel like the adolescent, juvenile years, I believe that's when they're most vulnerable. Kids coming from the inner city are more prone to misbehavior and crime. So I just, I really feel like I could be a role model for those who, are coming up. And, like I said, that first charge keeps coming back every time you're rearrested. So I definitely want to deter them from, leading in that direction. So I guess my whole story is about the relationships. And for me, the most intimate, I guess it was, with the criminal justice system, because, at times, it challenged me. I felt defeated at one point, but not knowing one day it can empower me to carry on this story. You know, it taught me to persevere and have to create opportunities from adversity. I always like to live by the term, you know, each one teach one, or taking a risk is imperative because you can miss 100% of the shots you never take. So hopefully this can trend and motivate a community where we can prosper even after the turmoil, and alleviate stress for guys who are coming home, and, you know, so they can win at life. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm so moved by your story as well. And I think the part of it that I connect to most, the idea of the things in our past that continue to show up and haunt us until you make the decision to change that narrative. And that's exactly what you did. And so the ways in which you're going back into your community and sharing your story, I think is really going to open other people up and to allow them to make the same decision, that I'm not going to let this continually haunt me everywhere I go, that I'm in control. And one of the things that we do at the Moth, and specifically in the community program, is talk about storyteller agency and the ways in which we can, you know, our narrative is the narrative, but we get to write the narrative that's going forward from here. And so I'm so thankful for you to be able to not only share your story, but also to find the will within you to change your narrative. So thank you so much, Walter. And thank you to both you and Karen for sharing your stories. If anybody,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. If anybody is interested in working with the Moth, we work with community-based organizations, nonprofits, and cultural centers, specifically through the community engagement program. I'm gonna leave the link for us here in the chat. But thank you all so much and have a great night.
Thank you so much. Thank you especially to Walter and Karen for being so brave and courageous and open in sharing their narratives with us. It is a beautiful thing as I look at the lights of the Hanukkah menorah in my office to know that there are other bright lights in our communities, and certainly the two of you are among those. So thank you very much. Transitioning now to our panel discussion, I just wanted to share who will be joining us, who is joining us. We're delighted to have Majora Carter with us, who is a MacArthur Fellow, Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, and holds 8 honorary PhDs. Very, very not distinguished person at all. 8 honorary PhDs, and is a distinguished alum at Wesleyan University and the Bronx High School of Science. Her work has been lauded by organizations across the political spectrum, and her clients range from small churches to municipalities, federal agencies, and Fortune 500 companies. She's permanently quoted on the walls of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one, which is also the subtitle of her new book, Reclaiming Your Community, available for pre-sales now and releasing in February of 2022. We're very honored to have DA Eric Gonzalez with us this evening. He made history in November of 2017 when he became the first Latino district attorney elected in New York State. Hard to believe it took till 2017 to do that. He grew up in East New York in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I know he actually lives very close by even today. And he attended John Dewey High School in Coney Island. He graduated from Cornell University in 1992 with a Bachelor of Arts degree with a dual major in government and history. In 1995, he received his JD from the University of Michigan Law School, where he was president of the Latino Law Students Association. Mazel tov on your win this past weekend. DA Gonzalez launched a groundbreaking initiative known as Justice 2020 to help him carry out his vision of keeping Brooklyn safe and strengthening trust in our justice system by ensuring fairness and equal justice for all. Justice 2020 consists of a 17-point action plan created by a committee of criminal justice reform experts, defense groups, service providers, law enforcement, formerly incarcerated individuals, clergy, and community leaders to make the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office a national model of what a progressive prosecutor's office can be. Vivian Nixon is writer in residence at the Square One Project. Vivian earned an MFA from the Columbia School of the Arts and has received the John Jay Medal for Justice, the Ascend Fellowship at the Aspen Institute, the Soros Justice Fellowship, and the PEN America Writing for Justice Fellowship. In May 2021, she was granted an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Bard College. Recently retired, she gained 20 years of leadership experience at College and Community Fellowship, a nonprofit that helps women with criminal convictions earn college degrees. She enrolled in CCF as a student upon her release from prison. In 2006, she became executive director, exponentially increasing the organization's resources and impact. The CCF community made significant contributions to public policy initiatives that restored Pell Grant eligibility to incarcerated college students. Brandon Stevens is an enrolled member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and resides on the Qualla boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina. He currently serves as the Director of Realty Services for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Cherokee, North Carolina. In this position, he oversees the Realty Department, Surveying Department, and GIS Department. Mr. Stevens has developed one of the first scale strategic plans for the Realty Services Division that included the execution of a 638 contract with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, allowing for the tribe to be in complete control of their own land and realty records. He is currently working on executing a division-wide reorganization to increase efficiency and accountability. Lastly, our moderator this evening is our dear friend and beacon of light for our community, Tommy Safian, who, as you know, is co-founder and executive director of Refoundry, a nonprofit that trains formerly incarcerated people to repurpose discarded materials into home furnishings and mentors them into their own businesses. He received his master's degree in English from the University of Michigan. So you and the DA can discuss your common bond. Please, thank you all very much for being with us. I look forward to hearing and learning from you.
Thank you, Rabbi Hessel, for that introduction, and to the Moth and to the storytellers, a tough act to follow. And also thank you, of course, to everyone who's tuned in to listen and watch, and to our incredible panelists. Spatial justice is a relatively new term, gaining traction in academic fields of geography and architecture with proponents like Craig Wilkins at the University of Michigan. And one of the purposes of the Spatial Justice Project in this evening's event is to introduce the term more fully into discussions and reforms around criminal, economic, racial, and environmental justice. So in our discussion here tonight, I encourage all of us to think about how the spaces we design and live in, schools, public parks, cultural centers, communities, prisons, shape our social relationship, our social relations, and the systems of power and privilege in our society in ways that do and also don't promote healthy civic engagement, including a healthy and authentic democracy. At the end of the panel discussion, Deanna Hoskins will lead us in a Q&A, and you can put all your questions and comments you have in the chat function, please. And I encourage you all to stay tuned to the always engaging Majora Carter, and to hear Kenyatta Emmanuel's really powerful rendition of a classic Oscar Brown Jr. song, as well as the unique multi-faith benediction. I turn now to our esteemed panelists, Brooklyn DA Eric Gonzalez, criminal thought leader Vivian Nixon, and Cherokee tribal leader Brandon Stevens. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor to speak with you. I'd like to start with a consideration of the architecture of our criminal justice system. Something to me that we actually lack that critical architecture. And that deficiency is not only why we have such a terrible criminal justice system, but also why reforming it can prove very difficult. I've had the privilege of speaking with a wide range of managers within criminal justice, legislators, law enforcement prosecutors, public defenders, people in the departments of correction, executive directors of post-incarceration programs, and reformers. And I always ask them, what is the purpose of a criminal justice system? And I invariably get very thoughtful answers, except no two are ever the same, which means that everyone within this system can create their own narrative for their role and their purpose. So even when people mention public safety, there's really no clear consensus on what that is. For example, if we ask George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin's mother how they see public safety, we'd get two very different answers. So I'd like to turn to first to DA Gonzalez and ask you, how do you define public safety, and what do you see as your role as a DA and your responsibility within the criminal justice system for public safety?
Well, let me start off by saying thank you to the 92nd Streetwide for inviting me, and Tommy for reaching out to Rabbi Hessel and to everyone on this. I wish everyone a happy Hanukkah. You know, you start off with the hardest question because I think it's easier to define what is not public safety than to define what is public safety. You know, generally, I can say as district attorney that public safety is not simply the absence of crime. Public safety is a very personal sense of whether or not people feel safe in their neighborhoods and whether they feel content going out in the streets. Are their kids safe to get to school? Can they walk? Can they go to the playground? And so one of the things that I've seen as district attorney is some of the safest neighborhoods in New York City, people are fearful and do not feel safe. So it's not just the absence of crime that's public safety. I think what's a fair thing to feel your community is vibrant and healthy, and that you can, walk around and enjoy the fruits of society. And it's, there's a sense of public health that's so important to whether or not people feel safe and whether or not people think their neighborhoods are safe. And, the surrounding circumstances of a neighborhood matter. And we're going to talk about this issue of physical design, but in neighborhoods that are not properly resourced, people have a sense of lack of safety because conditions around them are so terrible. But in defining my role in this system, I'm responsible, of course, for public safety, but I believe that my role is about justice. Police officers are charged with enforcing laws on the streets and dealing with things, but my role is much more complicated. My role is a sense of justice and what that means. And for me, it's very clear coming from East New York that justice means more than just the outcomes of a case, but whether or not the criminal legal system that I work in treats victims and accused with a sense of dignity, and whether or not people feel that they've been heard and listened to and taken seriously. That is ultimately what justice amounts to. It's the feeling that people get going through the process. You can have people who come through the system and have completely similar outcomes. And the person who feels like they were treated respectfully and thoughtfully often will feel better than the person who feels that they were dismissed. But it's a difficult question. Obviously, physical safety is an important piece to public safety, but by no means is it really what drives the person's subjective beliefs of whether or not their community is safe.
Thank you for that thoughtful answer. I appreciate it. Vivian, in this turn towards looking at ways to reform, we've heard a lot of calls to defund the police, abolish prisons, and other, what might be considered radical restructuring ideas. How do you view these efforts, and what do you see as the best way forward to restructuring our criminal justice system? Should we just tear down a racist, oppressive infrastructure we built and start afresh? Or is there some other pathway that you see?
Well, first, thank you, Tommy, of course, for inviting me. Thank you to the 92nd Street Y, Rabbi Hessel, and it's good to see everybody on this panel, especially DA Gonzalez, who's been a partner in really trying to think through how we create something that is more fair, more just, and treats people with dignity. I don't pretend to have any answers, and I don't think that any idea is too radical for consideration. I think sometimes we get lost in the way things are framed. So when defund the police, abolish prisons, that language, it triggers something in people because they're not able to imagine, how do we do that? Because it seems like this kind of instant solution. Oh, all we have to do is get rid of the prisons, get rid of the police. But even people who are diehard abolitionists understand that abolition is not an event. It is a process. It is a way of life. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, and Beth Ritchie, renowned sociologist, came up with the phrase everyday abolition, which really simply means that every day I'm trying to do something that makes our society a better place. Every day I'm trying to struggle to create a society where people are treated with human dignity and where we are collaborating together to create a movement for social change where prisons and police as we know them do not need to exist. But we also know that violence is real, crime is real, and we're never going to get to a place where we can imagine abolition unless we deal with the very difficult problem of violence. We heard a very powerful story of a domestic violence survivor from the Moth. I mean, we have to come up with solutions that do make people feel like they're safe in their communities. But the answers aren't that simple. I do believe that the way forward is for us to just take a deep breath and agree that we do need a long, sustained conversation about our history. The history of violence in the United States, the history of white supremacy, and all the ways in which those systems have broken down, not just the way we do criminal justice, but the way we do education, the way we do care of the indigent, the way we do our economic structure, the way we do medicine is all infused with this basic understanding that it is okay to treat some people in a violent manner and that some people are better than others simply because of an invented thing called whiteness. That is the fact. And until we have a sustained conversation about that, we're not going to get anywhere. So the way forward is for us to suck it up and start talking about race for as long as necessary.
Well, thank you for that insightful and impassioned response. Brandon, DA Gonzalez talked and Vivian talked about dignity as part of justice. And Vivian talked about facing up to the history of violence and white supremacy. We just came off a holiday, Thanksgiving, that we tell every year, and that reinforces a founding mythology in America as one of inclusion and welcome, commemorating the settlers and the Wampanoag coming together in community. Now, I know that Native Americans are far from a monolithic culture or identity, but can you speak how generally this view of the myth of Thanksgiving and how it's constructed within the story of the Native American genocide?
Absolutely. Well, number one, I want to say thank you for being included in this conversation, because so many times American Indians are not included. When you look at the census, you check, are you white American, are you Hispanic, are you Black, are you Asian, or are you something else? And my mother actually has a shirt that says, I'm something else, and kind of a little play on words, but we're not listed. And that's part of it. It's for 400 years ago, or give or take, when the settlers came, the colonists came, American Indians rescued them from their own annihilation of starvation, disease, helped them gain shelter. And there's some debate on what happened at that first Thanksgiving, that first dinner, but basically it was love and care that the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead and the Mashpee Wampanoag came along to Plymouth Rock and basically saved the settlers and instilled in them farming, how to develop communities. And these were two of the last tribes to gain federal recognition from the United States government. But what plays along in that 400 years is even more tragic, because we lost tribal citizens. Initially, the first wipeout was from disease. We lost to smallpox, whooping cough, even venereal diseases. The second came along when the settlers decided to start spreading out and actually developing the areas. There are anthropologists and archaeologists who have noted dozens more tribes or tribal nations in that area that have just disappeared. And we were eliminated then by not necessarily disease, but by violence, relocation. And that took away tons, just scores of thousands of tribal citizens. Some of the anthropologists and archaeologists, they can't place a number on it because they didn't have a census before the settlers came. They estimated somewhere around 100 million to maybe 20 million tribal citizens that lived across the United States and into Canada. But after the second wave happened, we were knocked down to between 600 and 240,000 American Indians. The second came in the 20th century, when we were forced into assimilation, when we were put into boarding schools, we were forced to change our names to Christian names, cut our hair, placed on uniforms, and we were taught history. But I think as some of you were talking about, we all know who writes history. It's the victors. So our young generations moved along, and the result was we lost our language. We were pushed into poverty. We were pushed into places that no one wanted to inhabit. And but what a lot of people missed, and I go back to one of my professors at Harvard we were showing demonstrations of how that during the settlers coming in, they would sometimes kidnap some of the natives. The natives would run off and try to get back to their community. But when the natives would capture one of the settlers, they stayed because they enjoyed the communal living, the way that the community came together to teach, to love, to nurture. But by pushing some of these things off, American Indians had a lot to contribute to the settlers' population that was just ignored. Instead, where the scalping came from were the settlers, because in those days the towns and the crown was saying, we've got to eradicate all these savage natives. We'll pay you for the scalps. And it wasn't just bringing in the scalps, but you had to bring the ears and the genitalia to prove, because there were different levels of reward for that. And that's where we got the term Redskins, because at the trading posts, people would say, how many Redskins do you have? So it's kind of like, that's kind of like our closest point to being the racial epithet that we have, because even we're left out of that. We're a community that we're Indian country. I was talking with Tommy a little earlier. It's like, what racial epithet do you apply to American Indians? And we've been left out. We're the invisible nation. But still, had we been brought in with loving arms, had we been met and people were working to understand, rather than trying to force us to assimilate, we gave a lot of things. We gave assistance to the Pilgrims. We gave rise to democracy from the 5 nations in the East. We gave you lacrosse. We gave you farming skills. We gave you medicine. We gave you different forms of math. We gave you, we even gave you into the 20th century modern day warriors. Ira Hayes was lifting the flag at Iwo Jima, but was cast off. I mean, so it wasn't just necessarily the Pilgrims, the iconic Pilgrims and the Indians that you see, holding the cornucopia and the shotguns and that sort of thing, but all through time, you see Billy Mills, the Jim Thorpes, and we were never depicted well in movies or in television shows. We had other classifications of people playing us and trying to understand what we were, but just taking a moment could have made all the difference. So I could go on and on and on. I won't hold up the conversation, but it wasn't just necessarily the misrepresentation or the thing that happened at Plymouth Rock in 1620. It's been 1720, 1820, 1920, on up to 2021, and we were one of the last people to receive the right to vote, which is now almost 100 years in setting that what we got the right, but we were never allowed to exercise that right up until even the 70s. So I can go on and on, but there were tons of things that have happened, but we're still here. And we're still dancing. We're still making our food. We're still making our medicine. We're still advancing our sovereignty and our heritage.
Thank you, Brandon. And I hope there's more ways that we can learn from Native American culture and we listen to. In speaking of in myths, Dia Gonzalez, one of the myths about our criminal justice system is that we designate jails and prisons as so-called correctional facilities, not only punitive, but presumably designed to rehabilitate people, a term I can't stand. But you've said, and I'm quoting you here, if we put people in jail for 6 months, a year, or 2 years, and we send them home to be more dangerous, then we've failed the people we serve. Can you share about how the design function of correctional facilities can make people more dangerous?
Yeah, it's really, very simple. Jail is trauma-inducing, it's disruptive. And when we send people to jail in particular, especially for short stays that really are not meant to be anything more than simple punishment, we subject the people who've been incarcerated to clear trauma. And so we understand that people are going to lose jobs. They may lose their housing. They lose connection to loved ones who get frustrated with them for, being in that situation again. They may lose children in custody, especially minor children. They miss important milestones. They may miss doctor's appointments, but they miss weddings and funerals and birthdays. They become, somewhat stigmatized and shunned. And so when we send people to jail simply to punish them, it speaks a little bit about, ourselves and what we think about human dignity and the value of human lives. I have a friend, many of you probably know her, Danielle Sered. She's the director of Common Justice. And Danielle speaks to this very, eloquently. She says, that we know what the drivers of violence look like. And she talks about shame and isolation, exposure to unabated violence, and the lack of the ability to take care of your own economic means. And quite frankly, this is what prison is all about. Jail and prison is often about shame. It's the shame of being in the situation that you find yourself at the lowest point of your life, probably. But it's also the design, and we talk about spatial justice now, it's the design of our jail cells, of our prisons. they're designed to give someone zero privacy. They're there, you have to go to the bathroom in public, you have to take showers in public, you're under constant surveillance. That deprivation of privacy, if you just want a moment to yourself, it's often, not available. And it causes isolation, right? And isolation is trauma inducing. People are cut off from friends and families. We make it difficult for people, in jail to make phone calls home or send letters out of the prison. We do a lot to put people in situations where they're completely cut off. And of course, if you're in solitary, you're going to be completely subjected to the psychological abuse of what that looks like. And so, I can continue on, but I think, I've made the point, which is the extraordinary use of government power to deprive someone of liberty has to make sense, and should be sparingly used only to when I believe that it's really done because it's absolutely necessary. And one of the things that I'm trying to accomplish as district attorney is to make sure that we reduce how often people are subjected to this. 95% of the people who go home to prison will return back to their neighborhoods, their community. And if they come out worse, we have failed them. Now, I'm not trying to overgeneralize that everyone's going to come out, more terrible than, but it takes a lot of resiliency to get through this experience. And so things like reentry matter. And I've seen statistics in Brooklyn of up to 60 and 70% of men who come home to homelessness. So we have a lot to do. But as district attorney, it's very clear to me that we have to figure out better ways of holding folks accountable and getting resources to people so we can actually build bridges so that they don't reoffend, as opposed to creating situations where we're encouraging them to give up on themselves. And that's why I've made that comment. And it's something that I, increasingly echo to the lawyers who work in my office, like, understand what you're doing. And I think the criminal legal system for a long time just wanted people to be punished. And I think we're moving away from that and treating people with the dignity that Vivian, talked about. Tommy, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. You mentioned how you speak to your staff about that, about changing the culture within your office. And we don't really associate a DA with being a progressive criminal justice reform leader, that a mantle you've taken up. And can you talk very briefly about some of the initiatives that you're creating and how you hope to communicate those and transfer those to other DA offices, across the country?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, I think proximity to your communities matter. And Brian Stevenson, who many of you probably have read his books or watched his movies, talks about, being very close to the communities you serve. Myself, I come from an impacted community in East New York. I've had family members incarcerated. I've had family members who've been killed. I believe that being very proximate to the communities that the criminal legal system is trying to serve and work through, and the people that come through that system matter. And so what I've attempted to do in some of the programming that we're working on in Brooklyn is to transfer some of the power. I believe myself to be a servant of the community, but I'm a steward of this criminal justice system and transferring power back to the community. So in places, for example, like Brownsville, we're working with the Brownsville Safety Alliance, and we're putting the opportunity for people to reimagine public safety and reimagining policing systems in their community, and having the police work with the community in ways that were unimaginable before. So the Brownsville Safety Alliance is a way of having public-led community safety, having community-based organizations and stakeholders on the ground, responding to things that in the past the police would respond to. So 911 calls come in, and as appropriate, community members respond to these calls. Many of them never needed a police response, but because we're so wired to call 911 whenever we need assistance, so we're trying something different. And that's just one of many examples, but really returning the power back to the community to deal with issues. In wealthier communities, people's first response isn't always to call the police when there's an issue. They can call a therapist, a psychologist, some kind of organization, maybe a drug treatment center. But unfortunately, in communities that are not resourced that way, the response is to call the police. And so what we're doing is providing roadmaps to figure out how community can respond to issues that don't require us to call for the police. And I think that's extraordinary coming from the district attorney's office. And I'm fully supportive and doing my best to find funding sources and quite honestly, helping to fund it myself through the office.
Well, thank you. I agree that having that blueprint that you're creating is critical, that others can adapt and improve on and adapt to their particular communities. Vivian, Brandon mentioned, being Native Americans being referred to as savages a lot. And language and the stories we tell help define our social structures in a lot of ways. And we often hear about barriers to integrating and for people coming home that the DA Gonzalez mentioned into civic, social, and economic marketplace. And you've been at the vanguard of showing how we've constructed language and narratives around criminal justice that help build and fortify these barriers. Can you share some of your thoughts about this and where you see change in this language and where you don't?
Sure. Thank you, Tommy. Well, language is extremely powerful. This conversation is about spatial justice, but, as much as the physical things around us are part of our space, the buildings, the furniture, the cars, language is also part of the air we breathe. It's all around us. Everything has a name, right? And so language is very much a spatial justice issue for me. And it goes beyond the idea that we should not use negative terminology to define an entire person. Must credit the Center for New Leadership and Eddie Ellis, who is the co-founder of the Center for New Leadership, for introducing a letter more than 20 years ago to say, when you constantly call me by the worst thing I ever did, ex-con, ex-offender, inmate, prisoner, you're identifying me as a thing I did, not as the person I am. Human beings are much more complicated than one act they did. Think about the multiple identities we all hold. Intersectionality is a theory, much like critical race theory, and Kimberly Crenshaw is kind of the mother of both of those theories, that we all hold multiple identities. Think about a woman who may be a correctional officer in her day job, but may go home at night to an abusive husband, who may end up in prison. So now she's a correction officer and she's the wife of an incarcerated man. Years later, maybe her teenage son gets picked up by the police and is on Rikers Island. So now she's a correction officer and the wife of an incarcerated man and the mother of an incarcerated child and a domestic violence survivor. These things are not impossible to exist in one body. So I think we need to complicate our language and get rid of the binary. It's not victim or offender, because many times most offenders have been victims at some point in their lives. The numbers are astronomical for women. Almost 90% of women have some kind of childhood trauma, 80% childhood sexual trauma, women who are incarcerated. So the victimization happens way before the criminal act. We need to move beyond it's us versus them. When the conversation becomes that antagonistic, we can't get to a solution. It's so much about identity. If I'm having a conversation with you, Tommy, and my passion for understanding our history is rooted in the fact that if we don't tell the truth, we're never going to heal as a nation. But if you're taking that as an attack on your identity as a white citizen, then that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, because you also have multiple intersections, right? You may come from a history where your ancestors have been victimized in some other way or have suffered some other kind of generational trauma. I think we owe it to each other to understand that, to look at each other in more complicated ways. We can't just fluff it off as if it didn't happen. The violence that was perpetrated against American Indians, the violence that was perpetrated against slaves that were brought here from Africa to work this land, to build the wealth of this country, the violence that has been perpetrated against women by the state. You know, violence can also be an act of the state. We need to talk about violence in these terms, not that it's just a person who commits an act against another person. It's a universal problem. Violence is structural, and it's not always physical violence. There is violence to our identities, to our survival as a people, to our dreams for the future. Now, it's changed in some ways. You can pick up a newspaper now, you can read about returning citizens or formerly incarcerated people. We talk about people who are incarcerated as people who are incarcerated, the operative word being people, right? We've gotten some progress on that. We even have some elected officials who are consistent in using progressive language. Where we haven't made progress, I believe, is that we still put a limit on how we view this population of people who have committed crimes or who have been convicted of crimes. We put a limit on what we see as their value to our society. So there's a very kind of low threshold that is, as long as they can re-enter society and get a job and get and have some roof over their head, and as long as they're not committing crime, that, you know, that is the high mark. I think we need a higher mark. I think we need to say that what redemption really means, it means that you now can reinvent your future. And there is no thing that you dream, there's no desire that you have, there's no future that you can imagine that you're not entitled to. The past is the past. It is thrown into the sea of forgetfulness, and you can move forward. That frees people up to reinvent themselves and live a life that is just something that they haven't thought of since they were a little kid. That's what happened to me. If I hadn't met people, been exposed to opportunities in my life where people looked at me and saw something valuable and said, there is no limit to what you can do, I might have still been answering phones at a hospital. which is a fine job if that's what you want. But I had bigger dreams. And when those doors are open, people will go where you lead them. People take opportunities that are given to them. We're not there yet, though. We have put a glass ceiling on where we think this population can contribute to our society. And my goal is to break that glass ceiling.
Thank you so much. I actually, when you said glass ceiling, I actually feel like it's more of a concrete ceiling for people who are far too familiar with concrete. And so that kind of low expectation that you talk about, and that oppression is not only it's structural in putting a limit and expectation for people for their own ambition and their own value. And I do think a lot of times the solution is the system right now, the way it's built, is not going to empower a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that they can't empower themselves. And I think that's what part of what you're speaking to. It's been a great conversation, and I had a lot of more questions to ask all of you, but we're running short on time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if it's okay, I'd like to invite in Deanna to ask some questions. Deanna, thank you.
Thank you, Tommy, and thank you to all of our panelists. This is a very rich conversation, one that is much needed. There aren't many questions in the chat, so I just want to invite people to drop their questions in the chat. One question that came up, and I think it was more of a statement, was from Pam N. She asked the question, do we really ever get to rewrite the narrative? And when she put that in the chat, I jotted it down because I thought that was a great question to pose to the panel. Do we believe we will ever be able to really rewrite the narrative?
For Native Americans, especially in my community, I would say that, yeah, because no one's written anything about us. And when you go to our high schools, we built a $130 million high school. And inside of it, we don't have our own history book that tells organically from where we were to where we're going and what's been accomplished. And if you don't have those core values to understand where you've been, what you're doing now, and what are the possibilities going forward, you'll never be able to create any resource and have an understanding of the path going forward to positive community and economic development. And you will continue to see the recidivistic criminal activities. You will continue to see bad habits, and you will continue to have misunderstandings. And so, yeah, one of the things that we're really working and looking for people to write our first history book, because history is written by all the victors. And so, no, we don't have a good understanding because that was erased and we were taught something else going down the way. So, yeah, for us in Indian country, yeah, there's an opportunity.
I was going to say, Vivian, I know you probably want to follow up on that one.
Oh yeah, we can rewrite the narrative. It's already been rewritten because what's being taught in our school system now is not the truth. So somebody already rewrote it. So what we need to do is start telling the truth. I know this is backwards because of the camera, but the truth is out there, and there are people who are brave enough to expose it. But when the truth tries to bubble up, what we get is this half-baked narrative about how evil critical race theory is, and trying to disprove the truth. But the only thing that combats a lie is the truth, and the truth consistently, over and over and over and over again. And I know now African American academics who are historians are trying to create a children's version of 1619, so that from the very youngest ages, we are taught this truth. If you're not going to teach it in our school systems, we're going to teach it in our homes, in our community centers, in our churches, in our synagogues, and in our mosques, and on our street corners. The truth will out, and it will win.
And our prisons too, I hope.
Yeah.
And our prisons, yes. Well, as long as they exist.
Right.
I just want to, kind of call back to the Moth story shares that we heard, and how those stories, how individuals as well can and should rewrite their narrative that breaks away from the identities that have been imposed upon them by that structural racism that Vivian spoke to, and can empower their own stories and form their own stories of value and empowerment. That's another way.
I thank you for that. I really believe, I always say, we can't move forward to change something if we don't even know the truth of where we come from, because we're actually trying to change a lie. And so in reality, we have to go back. And DA Gonzalez, thank you, because you said something I think is very important around what equals public safety, and that lack of resources does it equals lack of feeling safe, lack of opportunities. But then you talked about the strategic, intentional design of your office and the DA's office in Brooklyn being one that makes sure that justice is carried out, not only for the survivor or the victim, but for the actual person accused of that crime. And that's very important, because a lot of times individuals who are perpetrators of a crime that may have occurred never get a benefit of the doubt and never felt like justice was served to them, because there is a level of accountability, but also there's a feeling of, was I railroaded? So I wanted to thank you for that. But I also want to ask you, how challenging is it coming into that role as the first Latina elected DA and actually being determined that you're getting ready to change the culture of a system that had been existing for years?
So Deanna, first of all, nice to see you. It's a challenge. And, this system was created, the system that we have has been created over, hundreds of years. And, it comes out of a tradition that many of you understand come out of, slave catchers, and it's a system that is baked in with racial inequities and disparities, and designed in ways to protect certain people and to disenfranchise others. But I'm optimistic. Someone said it earlier, it might have been Vivian, that it's a process. Mm-hmm. And, we and progressive prosecutors, I was among the first wave of progressive prosecutors to get elected, in 2013. My predecessor, my mentor, Ken Thompson, got elected. The following year, I believe Marilyn Mosby got elected. The following year, Kim Fox got elected. I was elected the same year as Larry Krasner and others. And we were a really small group. We would sit in rooms and talk to each other, and there'd be 10 of us in a room, 8 of us in a room. Today, there are over 70, I would say over 70 prosecutors' offices that have elected people who believe that the criminal legal system needs to be reformed in dramatic ways. And, we represent, tens of millions of people across America. And I think that this is going to be a process by which eventually we will see change. I don't believe that, progressive prosecutors by themselves are the answer, but we are a start, and we will continue. So I'm optimistic that culture change is coming. What I've tried to do in my office is talk about it all the time, so that when I'm no longer a district attorney, that the clock can't go backwards, that the things are built in the office and processes are designed in the office that ensure due process and fairness, like the establishment of our conviction review unit, like entrenching that process into the office so that a future district attorney may not be able to dismantle that they, getting it right and righting the wrongs and acknowledging the harm that the district attorney's office has caused through injustice matters. And so that's my goal. But I'm optimistic that this process is happening. There's obviously pushback, and all of you have seen the pushback that's happening. But I believe that we will be better year after year, and in 10 years we'll be way better than we are today. But we need to just remember that this system was created over hundreds of years, and we're not going to dismantle it tomorrow. But we're working to build a better and fairer system.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
One thing, once again, or first, DA Gonzalez, I applaud your efforts, and I hope you have all the resources and all the support and push to help make some reforms to some draconian methods and processes. Here in Indian country, we don't have the luxury to cast away human capital. It's so important because, one, there's not many of us. There's only about 4 million American Indians, across the United States. Some of us have tribes that are as small as, 100. With Cherokee, we're 16,000 strong, but still, that's when you start having convicted felons, you can't toss away humans. You have to. We really, from our roots way back, have been more of a meritocracy to try to look for performance. And it's time for us as leaders to stand up and expect performance, but also to be true leaders, to provide resources, to provide support, to be advocates. And if we don't do that, then it's not up to the DAs and the police and the correctional facilities, as we call them. It's up to us to bring people back in, to share love, what we did, and for the community to go. So that really is another piece that Native American or Indian country really provides back, because I have 4 convicted felons working on my staff. I have a reformed drug user who's now a paramedic and is now looking at going on to higher levels of medical school. It was through support. We didn't cast anybody out. And of these 4 convicted felons, I've got 3 of them going back to college to get their degrees. We're giving them the time. We have to do that, and that's part of it. It's just a little bit of love goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. One of the things, Tommy, when we first talked about this conversation around spatial justice, I really went to that conversation that Vivian talked around of how we define abolition. And understanding that it's a process to get to where we want to be. But in that process, how do we change the spatial environment that individuals are held in? And I like to use the example of, if you're in a sewer, and we know a sewer is full of just crap and dirt, do I leave you there while I fight to get you out? Or do I at least try to get clean water in there and continue to fight you out? I change the space dynamics that you're in. And a lot of people know, for us, even in New York, closing Rikers and building smaller base, we got beat up about that, but it was strategically around the design of that space, because we are not to a net zero of total abolition of needing correctional facilities. But in the meantime, what do we do that doesn't cause harm to individuals, but actually start to build individuals and invest in treating them with human dignity, because their current situation at Rikers is not providing that setting?
I'm going to let Vivian talk about this, because I think it's always wonderful to hear her perspective. But I will share this. I had the opportunity about 3 years ago to visit Germany. And I went there for the sole purpose of seeing alternative methods of incarcerating people. And what I witnessed in Germany would shock most people: how their jails were designed and the spatial design of how their jail was designed to promote human dignity. People had privacy. They had their own showers in their cells. They had their own bathrooms. I witnessed their correctional officers knock before they tried to enter a cell. There was just, I was at 3 different jails. I went to see a supermax jail, then I saw an intermediate jail, then a low-level jail. Some of these facilities look much more like college campuses than we would ever see. But when people were being sent to less confined places, they had their own rooms. They were more like dorm rooms. They had communal kitchens. It was designed to make sure that people were successful and to start to think about life on the outside. And actually, when I got to some of the less secure facilities, people were allowed to leave during the day to pursue employment and visit family members, and they were instructed when to come back. And people actually came back because if they knew that if they missed curfew or they just absconded, that those privileges would be taken. But the ability to imagine a different way of incarcerating people and getting better results is not something that we have to create from whole cloth. We can look to other countries, and Germany is not alone in treating people with dignity while they're incarcerated.
I know we have run out of time. We can always keep going on with these conversations. I want to thank you guys for allowing me to do the Q&A session, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tommy to kind of do a call to action. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much, and for all the great comments and questions that came in. There's so much to talk about here, and throughout, I just want to let people know that throughout 2022, Opportunity Justice will hold similar forums to address spatial justice in the lead up to the Spatial Justice Project public exhibits in October. I particularly, given the conversation today, look forward to discussing the Build Back Better bill and what we mean by building better and for who. I would like to ask each of you if you very briefly, in a sentence or two, a call to action for our audience and each other.
I'll step in and start that if that's okay. There's so many different causes and so many different things that can be done to help Indian country, but basically learn more about us. Do anything you can. Visit a reservation, talk to American Indians, catch their story, catch their narrative, but basically just learn about us because that's the one challenge that we have most of in the world today, is that just no one knows who we are, what our values are. And so we would appreciate that.
I would challenge people to do what you can, no matter where you're at, to focus your attention and resources on improving the environment in poorer communities. If you're affiliated with a not-for-profit or you're in a position where you can influence an elected official, help make the case that money that goes to parks, that picks up trash, that improves the quality of life for residents matter, and it leads to public safety. And even when money is tight, treating these communities with fairness and environmental justice matters. And there's a great article in the New York Times about the effects of greening a community that I would encourage all of you to read. But what the study showed was that if you green the community appropriately, there was a nearly 30% reduction in crime. And so I'll put it into the text if I can find the article so that everyone can read it.
Thank you. Vivian?
There was years and years ago, I think one of Irma Bombeck's first books was Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And So I want to end with, because I'm so glad I was in a conversation about justice tonight where the word love was mentioned more than once. That, when we were in kindergarten, we learned to treat other people like we wanted to be treated, right? And we learned to share. We learned that that human beings are all equal and that we should be fair to one another. If we could start treating communities that way, that everybody deserves healthy spaces to live in and parks in their communities and good schools and an opportunity to earn a good living and good medical care and good places for their elderly to live out their last years. If we could just agree that we all deserve that, that's public safety. That's what public safety looks like. And we can do that. We just have to start caring about other people as much as we care about ourselves. You're on mute, Tommy.
All right. Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate it. I learned so much tonight and have great admiration for all of you and hope we can continue this conversation collectively and individually as well. I want to hand it back over now to Rabbi Hessel to introduce Majora.
Thank you. And before I do, I just want to say thank you to all of you. And Vivian, you reminded me of the biblical quote, love thy neighbor as thyself. We need to love one another, just like you said. So I already read Majora Carter's bio, which is lengthy, and I probably scared her in thinking she was actually on the panel. So that was my mistake. I'm sorry. But nonetheless, I want to share the quote, her quote, that is on the Smithsonian Museum of African American History in DC, which you should definitely see it if you haven't yet. It is, you don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. So Majora, thank you for being with us and thank you for forgiving me.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me and listening to everything that just happened before this. Thank you. I'm honored to be included. So as Rabbi Joe was saying, I actually I'm a real estate developer, urban revitalization strategist, but most importantly, I am a around the way girl from South Bronx in New York City, period. It's born, bred, still live here. And I just wrote a book called Reclaiming Your Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. It's actually available for pre-order right now, and it's out. It will be in print in February of 2022. And it literally is what the title says. And in a thing about race, about spatial justice right now, it is about community is not just a place, it's an activity. But how it's built, what people are coming back home to, how people live their lives while they're in it, is super important. So the way that I define our community, which is a poor community of color, I don't call it poor, underprivileged, blah, blah, blah. We actually use the term low status, which is what I'm going to read you a little section of my book. And we use low status not because the people in it or there's something wrong with them, but status meaning the way that inequality is assumed and how it's perceived specifically from inside and outside the community. So we use the term low status community versus poor, underprivileged, et cetera. So here's my book, or at least a section of it from the middle. So anyway, one of the most effective and insidious effects of white supremacy is that it leads not only actual white supremacists, but some people of color and other allies to support the misguided notion that poverty is a cultural attribute of low status communities. The nonprofit industrial complex comprises social justice activists, community organizations, philanthropy, and government agencies that all unwittingly, to be generous, support an operational theory that poverty is a constant to be stabilized, with occasional Cinderella stories emerging. The first part of the Bible verse, John 12:8, you will always have the poor among you, may very well be the underlying chord that brings people dedicated to the institution of the nonprofit industrial complex to bear. but without regard to the context of the spiritual restoration, generosity, and gratitude in which those words were written. The nonprofit industrial complex entrenches rather than enriches those that fall into poverty through no fault of their own. In other words, low status communities will always need help because as a class, they will simply never move in the right direction, despite billions of dollars spent year after year for decades. Most low status communities I've come in contact with, including my own, contain a wealth of nonprofit programs designed to help people adapt to poverty: food pantries, homeless shelters, after-school programs, homework wealth, job training programs, rental assistance, and rental housing lotteries for people in the lower income bands are abundant. Other programs facilitate the extraction of the brightest talent from low status communities. Think of the college readiness programs designed for a relatively small portion of high academic achievers among all the students with potential in low status community schools. The assumption is that the talent from our communities is expected to migrate out, AKA brain drain or bright flight. Put another way, that migration is the cause of a talent retention deficit in low status communities. In contrast, far fewer programs are designed to move people out of poverty or generate wealth as they stay within their own community, such as homeownership support, financial literacy, credit repair, and business development workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs. The problem with this decades-old status quo community development is that the same type of poverty-level economic maintenance is continuously repeated. Poverty-level economic maintenance in low-status communities looks like this. Instead of banks and credit unions that could help people grow their money, check cashing stores and pawn shops proliferate. Instead of a diverse array of ways to feed yourself, like supermarkets, cafes, restaurants, and farmers markets, you'll find predominantly fast food and other unhealthy options. Instead of ways that encourage maintaining a healthy lifestyle through diet and exercise, you'll find more pharmacies and health clinics running lots of dollars through the community to treat lifestyle conditions such as diabetes and obesity. You'll also find many options to self-medicate via ubiquitous liquor stores. Instead of a vibrant mix of retail options, slight variations of dollar and discount stores will likely be your only options. Instead of different levels of housing affordability for both renting and homeownership, you'll find a high concentration of very low income, government subsidized rental housing. These generate huge fees for a small cast of players in the multifamily real estate development industry, while entrenching a landless class with little hope of breaking out and experiencing one of the most vaunted aspects of the American dream, homeownership. These projects create healthy revenue for some, almost exclusively outside the community. However, the net result is concentrated poverty and all the issues associated with poverty, from poor educational attainment, decreased health outcomes, and higher rates of people involved in the justice system. I would also argue that concentrated poverty cements the perception of people from both inside and outside those communities that everything and everybody in them are simply of less value than others. Yet, despite the shamelessly repeated results of the poverty level economic maintenance tradition in low status communities, remarkably little has changed in the proliferation of these types of community development that exacerbate the predictable outcomes. For example, billions of philanthropic dollars have been poured into the South Bronx. However, poverty, unemployment, health, and education and justice statistics continue to earn us the dubious distinction of being among the country's very poorest congressional districts for more than 30 years straight. Why is community development in low status communities so narrowly defined? I don't presume much, but I have launched and continue to refine my concept for a much more holistic approach to low status community development that starts from the inside the community itself. I've learned that some see my approach as far outside the realm of possibility for someone like me, way too far for some folks. And I'll stop there. But thank you so much for having me at this amazing event. And And I really just want to say, what we're trying to do is build those communities back to the point where people that are returning are actually coming back to something that could sustain and nurture and support and love up on them economically, socially, environmentally, spiritually. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Majora, and consider this an invitation for a little book talk and signing, perhaps.
I would
after
love
February.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk.
Thank you.
So without any further ado, we are really blessed to have Kenyatta Emmanuel with us, who will perform a very short spoken word based on Oscar Brown Jr.'s song.
Bitter man, get 'em in, bitter man. That sun is hot and plenty bright. Let's get down to business and get home tonight. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Roy, she's good for a start. Bitter men, get 'em in. Now here's a goodbye, only about 15. A great grandmammy was a die-homey queen. Just look at her face. She sure ain't homely. Like Sheba in the Bible, she's black but comely. Bitter men. Gonna start at 3. Can I hear 3? Step up, gents, take a good look, see, cause I know you'll want her once you see her. She's young and right, make a darn good breeder. Bitter men. She's good in the fields. She can sew and cook. Strip her down, Roy, let the gentleman look. She's full up front and ample behind. Examine her teeth if you got a mind. Bitter men, get 'em in. Here's a bid of 3 from a man who's thrifty. 325, can I hear 350? Your money ain't earning you much in the bank. Strip her down, Roy, let him look at her shanks. Bitter men. 350's bid. I'm looking for $400. She's a bargain, sure. 4's the bid, 455. $500 now, look alive. Bitter men, get 'em in. Don't mind them tears, that's one of her tricks. 550's bid, and who'll say 6? She's healthy and strong and well equipped. Make a fine lady's maid once she's properly whipped. Bitter men. 6. 650, don't be slow. 7 is the bid. Gonna let her go. At 7. She's going. Gone. Pull her down, Roy. Bring the next one on. Bitter man, get 'em in, bitter man.
I'm just taking a moment to sit with that. Thank you, Kenyatta. Thank you very much. We turn now to our benediction prayers, and we begin with Brandon Stevens.
We say Shio and Shki Nagada, meaning saying thank you and to each and every one of you. And Gangeyu, that is a word we use to express our love. But we pray and say, One Tlana Galaladi Heha Agidalda Galaladi, our Father who art in heaven and above us and around us and in us. Sadaklo di geisha icha da doli stane, because you are loving, we pray to you. Ishela he liste, isha danela naha ogade ste no do di. Thank you for providing for our needs. Sisa galana do da ni da sta. It icha do le nishtena. It is with us, it is through you, it is through your name that we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Wado, thank you. Dear God, we know spatial justice has not been found. For many of our sisters and brothers live in cramped spaces and places, many alone. Grant us the strength and the fortitude to speak out for those who are not heard nor seen, for we know what it is like to be vulnerable. We cannot ignore the cries for help, the shouts of children in need, and their parents who are in despair.
Lord, please allow us the courage to act. Help guide us as we rebuild our world in your image and in your likeness. filled with the sanctity, joy, and hope. Only then can we be guided by your love and your power. May your glory and peace fill all of our souls. Replenish what we put out today twofold. Let us look for opportunities to weave a world for all of us. And let the church and the Zoom say amen.
Thank you for joining us this evening. If anything, we recognize that we have much work to do. And I know that with the leadership we had this evening and with one another's strength and support, we will get there one day soon, God willing. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you to those who participated. Shalom.